Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest. We here honor creators, and Maven did something that was kind of creative. She joined and participated in a movement, and she was able to make her voice heard by getting arrested. And Maven, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to be in that movement?
Yes, I would love to do that. Because I think I you did a quick little clip that some people saw about my arrest, and I think there are people in this sphere that do know why I'm passionate about this subject, and but I think maybe a lot of people don't. So I thought that might be a good thing to talk about why I care about this issue. Um, so the issue that I got arrested for and the protest I was arrested for was at the Supreme Court of the United States in Washington D.C. and that's because this last Tuesday they were hearing so March 27th 2024 they were hearing arguments against mifepristone and I think one other drug, but that's kind of the one that really had the spotlight, which is a medical abortion drug. When people talk about a medical abortion versus surgical abortion, that's usually what it is. It's a pill that will clear out the uterus. Basically, it's extremely safe. And it's safer than Tylenol, even. Like it has fewer side effects than Tylenol is known to have. And but there were people who illegitimately brought it up and got it all the way up to the Supreme Court to attempt to ban it, despite its safety. And the I guess the effects or the ramifications of it were pretty big if they had been successful. And though like the arguments were heard and it hasn't been officially decided, so I'm just trying to make sure that I understand and I'm representing this right. It didn't look like it went well for them, so I'm really hoping that we can expect the Supreme Court to do the right thing and not ban this medication when they do actually vote for this, for it, which will come later, I think. But the ramifications, for one, is that it would be nationwide. The lawsuit was against the FDA, and if they succeed in banning this, not only do they make abortions in general much more difficult and dangerous and less accessible for women who need them. It wouldn't be just in the states that are banning or severely restricting abortion. This is another a case where they're basically getting their agenda, pushing their agenda to affect women nationwide, and it just puts women in a lot more danger because of it. And so I feel like maybe I was getting a little too detailed there, but that's what it was for. And so that's what I was there to, I guess, to protest or just to represent the pro choice side of the movement, which is that um, these kinds of decisions, these medical decisions, should be made by the women facing them and medical professionals. This should not be in the hands of politicians or religious hate groups, because that's really what they are, who just really want to control women both sexually and reproductively. It's not okay. And so that's why I went there. And this is, it might be ironic to some people that this is so important to me, because for those who do know me, not only do I identify as asexual, so I'm not someone who has ever been in a sexual relationship with someone, and that's kind of one of the ideas that the so-called pro-life side of things has, is that it's just promiscuous women that just want to have sex without any consequence, and dare not to want to be mothers at the time that they're doing that, that want or care about having an abortion. So this is, I think, again, one of the reasons why it might seem weird or ironic that I am very passionate about this, when but that's not my lifestyle at all. I have never needed an abortion, or wanted one. I don't think anyone wants an abortion. No woman wants one, as much as they also try to make it sound like promiscuous women are having abortions for fun and recreation. It's just really damaging propaganda. But anyway, I've also, especially, well, this I made this choice because of the Dobbs decision repealing Roe versus Wade. despite the fact that I am on birth control to just manage my own symptoms, my own cycle, and cramps especially could be really debilitating for me. So I'm on birth control, but I went ahead and I decided to sterilize myself after this because the age that I'm at, which right now I'm 37 years old, um, if it hadn't been for this, and if I had a partner, I don't think biological motherhood would have been off the table for me necessarily if I lived in a country where it was safe to be pregnant, especially a higher risk pregnancy as I would automatically be because of my age. But because of what happened, because I knew and I understood the really grave danger, and because I understand that birth control doesn't always work. So even though there's so many reasons why I should not get pregnant at all, just the fact remains that I could be attacked or assaulted by someone. And if my birth control fails at that point, or if I've gone off of it, or if I'm on antibiotics at the time, which can affect it, it just I I didn't feel safe enough, and I just wanted to be really, really sure that I can't get pregnant. So I've sterilized myself. So I should not need an abortion ever, ever, ever. So why
So
do
you're not
I care about it so
you're
much?
not joining for personal gain, but the issue is larger than just Maven.
Much, much, much bigger than me, or even women who need abortions or who have ever needed one or will need one. This really does affect all women everywhere, especially with we're really just seeing the beginning of the fallout, the complications that happen, and it's women who suffer the consequences of it. So I actually was I switched from being, again, I always have to put quotes around pro-life because I don't think it's a an accurate label for that side, even though it's the most common one that they refer to themselves as. I think I'm more pro-life than any of them ever are or will be. And that's true for any person who is pro-choice, who cares about bodily autonomy. And really that's the issue here. It's not about life. It's not about concern for babies. It's not about concern for women. This is really about controlling women. And if we're going to allow that, and unfortunately, a large, not large, it's the majority of the citizens of the United States do feel that abortion access is healthcare and should be allowed. Whether or not there's some level of restrictions on what's comfortable, but overall the majority of people do see abortion as something that should be within the medical realm and not political. So anyway, so it's just a minority. Anyway, um um I have a few examples to give. I could go on forever, so I'll try to be more succinct about this. But um if people who know more about my story know that I had a relative, and this was before Roe versus Wade was repealed. But she was 23 years old. It was her first pregnancy. It was a wanted pregnancy, right? Because she's not the stereotype of the promiscuous Democrat woman, just sexually liberated. She was, what you call a good Mormon woman who was seeking motherhood, which is the reason that we are raised to believe that we were created for and exist for it, which is to provide tabernacles, provide bodies for spirit children who are waiting to have this experience. And so so she was that. She was doing everything correct. She was married. She was married in the temple, even sealed to her husband. And at 9 weeks along, and again, this first pregnancy, she was only 23 years old. She was found dead in her home, and she died from a pulmonary embolism, which is something. There are so many things that pregnancy increases risks for. It's just and that's one of them. I guess I just want to say, like, pregnancy is genuinely very dangerous for a woman, and throughout all of history of mankind, it has been the number one early killer of women, um, versus old age and like natural causes like accidents and stuff. Childbirth has been an incredibly deadly thing to partake in for us just historically. So Anyway, and there's a lot of reasons why it's just really tough on our bodies. So unfortunately, she passed away, and it was just really shocking. And I didn't actually even know this relative very well, because it's a relative through marriage, so not someone blood related to me. But I just couldn't get over it. It was really, I'm gonna get emotional now. It was just really shocking. It was really tragic, and it was hard not to see, as someone raised in a church, that my only calling and the only good way to be considered a good woman is to have children. Um, that's really just like the one package option that we have to be considered a good woman. It is that. I just couldn't help but wonder, even though the church technically in its handbook does not call abortion murder, it says so specifically. And it's allowed for cases like this one ended up being, where a mother's life is in danger. The fact that there's so much taboo around it, and so much
And it's
just
really
yeah,
generational trauma in a way, because
yeah,
the generation before me thought that abortion was murder, right?
yeah. And birth control was a bad thing as well. So that's these are ways that I think the church has changed. But officially right now, it is not considered murder. And again, like, it's technically allowed for health, but the thing is, the way the church talks about women in pregnancy, health and your life is just really not brought up all that much. And the way health is really talked about is usually in terms of vanity or discomfort. Like, women who don't want to be pregnant, or women who get an abortion, are seen as selfish or faithless. Um, and yeah, again, it's just and it's just chalked up to, oh, that they don't want to look bad, or they're worried about their career, or they don't like the side effects, because being pregnant and giving birth is not pleasant. And the thing, we know that, and there's plenty of women who would still and have happily done it, because they want that, they want to be mothers. Some like being pregnant. I don't think anyone really likes the childbirth part of it, but after, there's a lot of endorphins and hormones when you hold that baby there. You don't have to force women to have babies. Like, we will have them. Not all of us need to, but there are plenty of us that always will. But anyway,
My,
I'm
my
getting
mother
up. Yeah, go
loved
ahead.
to be pregnant. She loved having babies. She loved caring for young toddlers. She loved everything about it. And there are lots of women that are like that.
Yeah.
And so, just like you were
Yeah,
saying,
I so I don't know why the church needs to control or try to make all women do that, as if we need to be told and made to do that. Um, and I just feel like, if again there wasn't so much stigma around either women who don't have children, who don't want children, or getting an abortion, um, I really wonder if this woman would still be alive if she, because again, this was before Roe versus Wade was appealed, and abortion was an option for her. I doubt she ever truly considered it, though, because of the culture and the environment that we're in. And I think because of that, that is why she is dead now. Whereas if it weren't so judgmental, if she could have had that abortion then, because things were not going well, she was having multiple problems. So as sudden as the death was, um I just want to make sure like giving things accurately. It wasn't an easy pregnancy, but that's also not uncommon. And so it's not that she knew she was facing death any more than any woman knows she's facing it when she's pregnant. It's not like she was told by doctors, like, this is a bad pregnancy. You have 85% chance of dying. Like, nothing like that. And a doctor couldn't honestly know that and really give something, a percentage like that. It's just not really in the realm of what's realistic. So she I think she could have considered, and maybe have gotten an abortion if the culture was different. Or she might not have. I could be wrong there, but I just do feel like she could still be alive today if she'd had the freedom to end that pregnancy, maybe try to work out some other health issues, and then try again later, when some of them were fixed or she was more ready. And she could be a mother now, because of that. Anyway,
and
I
That's
Yeah.
what you're talking about, being pro-life. You are pro her life,
Right.
and it's gone.
Women's lives. Yeah. And the thing is, when we talk about yeah, I think I am getting into the weeds, but I'll
Well,
talk really briefly. I'll talk about what's actually coming up at the end of April again with the Supreme Court, and this is again coming from states who have really strict abortion bans. I believe this one is coming through Texas, and it's regarding the Emergency Medical Treatment Act, which should ensure that anyone, but obviously we're specifically talking about pregnant people here, um, that they can receive life-saving services, and sometimes that might mean for a woman ending a pregnancy, which is an abortion. So I guess because I do want to say really quickly, there are some people and there is some like pro-life propaganda that's trying to make abortion out to be only elective and not ever medically necessary. And so I just want to like clarify that right now. Anytime a pregnancy is ended deliberately for any reason, that is an abortion. So if it's medically necessary, if for like an ectopic pregnancy or something else going on, that's abortion. It's not something different. So this is what we're talking about. We're talking about ending a pregnancy. Um, anyway, so with this emergency medical act, and we are seeing this happening in states like Texas and Idaho and other places where there's so much like vehemence and anger and hatred towards women and around this idea of abortion. The emergency care providers and OBGYNs are genuinely scared, first of all, to even offer that as an option when it is something that should be offered to a woman whose life or pregnancy is high risk.
that's
They can't
part
even
of
bring it up.
informed consent, right?
Yeah.
To give all the options.
Right. Well, I mean, in those states, it's not an option. So yeah, when it's like it's just making things really difficult for providers and for women. And um I mean, even I'm forgetting now the which politician it was in Texas who um I know there's some again that are just so wrapped up in this misogyny and this hatred of women that the fact that a woman may get an abortion as part of a life-saving procedure in the emergency room because an emergency is happening and her life is in danger. They're viewing this as like some kind of a loophole that will turn emergency rooms into abortion clinics, you know, and women will just like walk up and just be like, "I'm having an emergency, doctor. Can you end this pregnancy?" And doctors whose licenses and livelihood and hospitals whose licenses and ability to perform and work are all on the line are just going to say, okay, yeah, I get it, an emergency, I'll take care of that for you. Like this insane idea of how things are going down. Anyway, it's just behind this anger, this real hatred for women, even if it comes to their lives. And we saw this also with Texas, with Kate Cox, who was a woman who had a pregnancy that first of all was non-viable, so there was not going to ever be a baby coming from this, and it was medically necessary. It was a threat to her life and health, and her case went all the way to the state Supreme Court, and she was still denied an abortion despite politicians saying that they will offer exceptions, or that when your life is on the line. And again, she had two of the typical exceptions that people say they're giving, and yet she was still denied. She still had to go out of state. And so something that Kate Cox had that my relative did not was the luxury of time to be able to do that. Because while my family member's pregnancy was difficult, the pulmonary embolism that killed her in seconds, it maybe a minute, but they can kill very, very quickly. And so I think for Kate Cox to know that her pregnancy wasn't viable and that it was life threatening, and still have time to battle her state Supreme Court, and then still have to end up traveling out of state to get the health care she needed. That's a privilege that not all women have. And I'm very happy for her that she was able to get the medical care she needed. But to bring it back to the Supreme Court and the arguments that are going to be coming up at the end of this month is really whether or not hospitals and doctors can be I'm losing my train of thought. Sorry.
They can do
uh,
what's medically necessary.
right, to save a woman who is pregnant when that's going to when whatever like life-saving measures are going to affect her fetus. And sorry, I need a water break here.
Sure. And I know that you've also, we can provide some links if you want to some of
Yeah,
these things that you're saying, some of these articles. And
yeah.
I know that more of your story about your relative is on the Mormon Stories episode that you were in. And
Hmm.
so, and also, but there was also, you had classes in college where
Yeah.
you were able to,
I'll get to that.
yeah,
I'm not quite finished with what I was saying,
sure.
and then we'll move on. Thanks, Jean, for helping this try to like move forward. I just wanted to wrap up with the SCOTUS things. Well, just the emergency care anyway. Pregnancies are just really fragile, and so almost any medication or any kind of an intervention has a high likelihood of affecting a pregnancy. They're just fragile, and because they're connected to the mother's body, because it is the mother's body, it's not a separate body, it's not a separate person. It's her blood, her lungs, her kidneys, everything about the woman's body is what's actually running these things for the fetus as well. So that's why there's just very few instances where a woman's life is in danger where a medical intervention may not potentially affect a fetus for the negative, depending on how dire the situation is. So with the statements that are coming up, again, the question is, what the pro-life, which are the anti-choice and really the anti-life movement are really pushing for, is that um, doctors and hospitals will not have to prioritize a woman's health and life at the expense of a fetus. So really, it's what's inside of her that is getting the most consideration now. And we are already seeing this happening where women are are dying. They are actively, their health is going downhill, and emergency providers are having to wait and watch this woman, and not anyone, because it's happened to more than one, just suffer and either have like a lot of bleeding or let infections just really start ravaging her body until the point that the fetus naturally dies itself, hopefully first before the woman dies, because if she dies, obviously they're both gone. But um the fact that doctors have to watch a woman go through so much pain and suffering, and until the point that she's at death's door, where they're finally able to feel like they can help her by ending this pregnancy and then doing whatever life-saving care they need to. um it's just really sad, and again, not all women will have the privilege or the luck to be able to get to death's door and then be pulled back by care. When it makes far more sense to help her way back at the beginning when there's a known problem, rather than waiting
For
for a
complications.
fetus to die first, yeah, or waiting for her to get to the point where she is actively going to die imminently before we'll finally help her. And so, and the reason why this is so important, and this because this affects all women, whether or not you're pregnant, and children, because if you're a pregnancy potential, we're seeing a lot of these laws protect children, women, I can't say women, but but females as young as 11 in some cases, who are considered of childbearing potential. If this ruling goes through, where doctors and emergency professionals have to consider the life of a fetus above a woman, they first have to make sure every woman coming in through the ER is not pregnant. And when you're going to the ER because your life is on the line, let's say you were in a car accident or something, and have doctors have to waste precious time trying to figure out if women, you could have men and women coming through from the same car accident or the same event or tragedy, and yet you have to stop for the women and take the time to make sure they are or are not pregnant before you can even decide what care you'll give to them. It's just insane, and it's incredibly harmful. It's very sexist, because obviously it's only going to affect half the a male will be able to get instantly the care that he needs to survive, whereas this extra and completely unnecessary stop has to be made for women, and again, girls, because this will also include minors, because minors are able to bear children. So anyway, so this is why I'm very passionate about this. So just because I've made sure that it's not going to affect me in the future, and I've been very lucky and privileged that these things haven't touched me personally as far as my body. This is why I care so much about this happening for everybody. And there's a lot more downsides to it too. But we can go, how did I actually get being like to the point of being willing to be an activist and actually fly to DC and then actually go as far as to get arrested, is a story that goes back to school. And I think that's where you were trying to lead me, right, Jean, per our discussion beforehand. So did you want me to jump into that, or did you have a
Yeah.
specific question there?
Nope. Just to talk about what in your educational past got you started in a way on the path of being an activist. It's like
Okay.
the Maven as a young, moldable girl in
Yeah.
college.
Girl, yeah. So I went to school at Brigham Young University, Hawaii. That's where I got my bachelor's degree. I studied cultural anthropology, but I also uh, got a certificate in what then was a very new program in conflict resolution and peace building. So one of the whole first year was very intensely internal. So before going into how to, facilitate and mediate conflicts between others, there was a lot of work we had to do on ourselves. So anyway, one of the um, required readings and one of the few books that I've kept, since that time, it's been over a decade since I've been in college, is this one. Hopefully I'm holding it up right,
Yep,
Jean.
it's good,
Am I
doing
good?
good.
Okay. All right. So this is a collection of sermons by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and this one particularly is called Strength to Love. And up until this point, being a member of the church, and obviously, thinking that I'm very superior and righteous compared to others, and having the right ideals and things, whenever I learned about moments in history like the civil rights movement or even the Holocaust, um, and or even just the end of slavery, so going back before that, before civil rights, before Martin Luther King Jr.'s time, just the abolition movement, um, I initially just thought of myself as, if I were in those times, I would be on the right side. I totally would have been an abolitionist. I would have been marching in, with the civil rights protesters if I was that, of age too in the 60s. That's who I was, and I definitely would have. It was during like this intense work and also reading this book, um, and reading about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s real threats, and things that he faced, I really kind of had I guess I'll call it a come to Jesus moment about myself, and the realization that I was not, there wasn't anything I was doing in my life currently that could support that idea that I would be this kind of a person if I lived in this kind of a time, because I knew that right now, which now being 12 years ago as I was taking this class, um, at that point, I had never stood up for anyone or any group. I'd never done anything. And even in conversations with my peers, I was actually pro choice at this time. I had learned enough back then about the dangers and the fallout of unwanted pregnancies for women, for children, for society, just for abuse levels, for crime. There's so many wide reaching um, effects of this. Uh, but I would never talk about it. I was content knowing that the right was there. I never in a million years thought that it would be taken away like it has. And if I did maybe bring it up, if I got any pushback, I would just silence myself and back off. And this was also true for LGBTQ issues at the time. I'm still kind of in my journey with this, but I did feel that I had gone beyond the point where I thought that it was a deliberate choice, which is how I was raised to think about it. I knew that that homosexuality was not a choice, that it was something, that people were born with, and I felt at the time that that did not make them bad people, that there was nothing for them to repent of for it, and I felt that they should be able to get married at the very least civilly, and have these kinds of pure romantic companionship, intimate type relationships that heterosexuals could. But
Just
that
like
was
you,
another
you, you don't have anything against left-handed people.
right, right. But I also this is another place where I just wasn't an advocate. I felt like an ally and I felt like an advocate, but it was only in my mind. It was not in my speech and it was not in my actions. And so I had this moment of realization that a silent advocate or a silent ally is not an advocate and is not an ally at all. There was nothing I was doing that was contributing to the world to make it better or easier for people and causes that I cared about. And it was sad to realize that about myself. But at the same time, I couldn't change it. Just realizing that and waking up to that wasn't enough to really empower me to change. And I think there's a reason for that. Um, I want to go to. I'll go ahead and bring up the slides. Um, because well, before I bring it up, I'll say this. I was too scared. That's the reason why I wasn't doing anything, and especially scared when it came to um, positions or views I had that seemed to go against mainstream either doctrine, or even if I didn't feel it was doctrinal, if I felt I was doctrinally correct in some of my more different views, just the fact that it was different from what was accepted culturally by my own group of people, that's what just made me too afraid to speak up. And that actually included defending the church as well as a Mormon, against other maybe outsiders or ex-Mormons to the church. I didn't feel like I could really stand up for the church there either. And so,
Had you
yeah,
not gone on a mission yet?
I had not yet. No, I'm trying to think. Actually, if I had, yeah, no, I had gone on a mission by the time I had started this. And that was part of the reason actually why I went, was to be less scared to talk about the gospel with people. Because I did see that in me like from way before. But I guess at this time I was seeing something more broad, that even though
And
I'd been on a mission, I could talk about the church's doctrines and things. It was still really, really hard when people were upset with me on the mission to put myself out there, and it was kind of a source of constant guilt if I felt like I didn't represent well enough. And after the mission, I still struggled, I think rightly, to defend it in a lot of ways, but again, it was the fear behind it.
missionaries aren't necessarily trained to be defenders. They're trained to be teachers. So that's sort of
Yeah.
where you'd be at.
Well, I mean, we're told to like in really generic ways that to stand up for the church, it's just to open our mouths and God will fill it, and that didn't really happen a lot of times. And even now, which sometimes this is why like interactions with missionaries and others can go really badly for this reason. But anyway, so I'm bringing this back up because with everything that's happening now, it's really been interesting to me that this has kind of come full circle, where there is a reason to be marching into streets where people's civil rights and liberties, it's not race based this time, but it is gender based, and it also there is a lot of intersectionality with race because it is minorities and underserved populations that are more vulnerable to the consequences of bans like this, or
Some
just
classes of
kinds of things.
some classes of people can't just go to another state to get an abortion if they needed it.
Right. Right. We still have some real issues with racism and poverty and just all kinds of, I guess, isms and um yeah, just some really sad and unnecessary divisions in our country. So yeah, so I would still say that it is known, like it is indigenous women and women of color are also more severely affected by issues like this, than a white woman like me, who, like I said, I've been very privileged, first of all, to be able to avoid ever needing an abortion, and to be able to have taken my future into my hands to make sure that I can't that's not something everyone else can do. So anyway, so yeah, so this was a moment, this was a book I brought with me to when I flew to DC, just to reread it and I reflect really on kind of this journey that I've been, not just out of the church, but in becoming now the kind of person that I wish I could have been back then, um, because the me back then would not have been able to do what I did last week. So I want to bring up this quote. This is from the book, and thanks, Jean, for putting it in for me. Do you want to go ahead and read it? Actually,
Yeah, let me read it. Courage and cowardice are antithetical. Courage is an inner resolution to go forward in spite of obstacles and frightening situations. Cowardice is a submissive surrender to circumstance. Courage breeds creative self-affirmation. Cowardice produces destructive self-abnegation. Courage faces fear and thereby masters it. Cowardice represses fear and is thereby mastered by it.
thank you. I think that really matches. I think the cowardless part really accurately describes where I was before, whereas the courage part feels a lot more true to who I am now, especially compared to that version of myself. And so, um, anyway, yeah, that's the past of it. I guess should we go ahead and get into actually what
Yeah,
happened there? I
so
know a lot of people have been dying to know like the details, the gossip,
so
what
you've
happened.
been studying the issues, you found out that there's an opportunity, you decide to go to Washington D.C., you sell all your belongings. No, I'm just kidding. And buy a ticket to Washington D.C. You're housed by a good friend, and
Yeah.
you're doing preparations. You're getting ready, and
Wait, can I talk about that?
yeah,
What
yeah.
you've got through so far, real quick? If I right now, I don't believe really in God or a supreme being anymore. At least not one that is running our lives as much. But the way that I got over there, if it had been my past self, I absolutely would have seen. I would have attributed these circumstances to God. So, um, what happened was I just didn't have the money for a plane ticket to go to Washington. So I knew about this protest happening. Um, I just didn't feel like I could participate in it. But I have been trying to sell some things and just kind of reduce the amount of clutter I have, and emptying out a storage unit so I don't need to have it anymore. And something that I had listed for over a month sold, and it sold for $300. And so at that point, this was a week before the protest. I live in Oregon, and so complete opposite sides of a very large country. And so I thought to myself, there's no way that $300 is going to be enough to get me across the country and back, especially a week from now. Right? It just, the tickets get more expensive the closer you are. And but I thought I'll just look it up. There's no harm in looking and seeing. And I was correct. The tickets from Oregon to DC and back were really expensive, and definitely far and above the $300. But I did already have a trip planned to Salt Lake. So I decided to look at one ways, from Salt Lake to DC, and then a one way back to Portland, and see if that would come in under the $300. And it actually did. So as soon as I saw that, I booked the tickets. I signed up for the march, and yes, I was able to stay with a wonderful couple who, they've been on Mormonish. I know I'm worried sometimes about who to call out or not, but I think Lee Cronville and his wife Nancy Smith are completely fine with me saying, they are very supportive of the efforts that I was going through. So I'd be surprised if they were um, upset about me. But I just wanted to say, like, I'm very, very grateful for them for being willing to house me and help me out over there. So yeah.
That's right. So you're at their house, and it's the night before the event.
Hmm.
I remember you telling me that you want to do this. They said it might happen, and you were like ready to do it, but on Tuesday morning, you might choose otherwise, right? And so was that
Okay,
any
yeah,
part of your eve,
yeah.
your preparation, your
So
Garden of Gethsemane?
um, I think I honestly feel like the Garden of Gethsemane moment would have been back before when I realized I was a coward, although it wasn't resolved then. A lot has changed in me from then to now, and I feel like I just um at some point before even this happened, just to be an advocate for this cause and to really care deeply about it, the decision was just made. And so once that decision is made, the fear is really gone, and it has been gone. So when I signed up for the march, there was a questionnaire that asked, your feelings on civil disobedience. And again, that's another, for me, another callback to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the bus protest in Montgomery, and with Rosa Parks, and the teen that kind of predated Rosa Parks, who did the same thing, um, where she refused to give up her seat for a white person, which was technically against the law. Um, that this kind of civil disobedience or law breaking is the kind that really brings attention to injustice and unjust laws, versus something, a crime like vandalism or fraud, which hurts people. And Martin Luther King Jr. is just also somebody who was arrested, um, for again for civil disobedience. He was not a violent person. That was his whole thing, was nonviolence and resistance. Peaceable resistance to injustice and unjust laws. Anyway, so so I felt fine with it. And part of the questionnaire also asked people participating if they were, how comfortable they were with the possibility of being arrested or not. And you didn't need to be okay with being arrested to participate in this protest. The point of it was not to be arrested, but just informed consent, really just looking at, this is where it could end up. And there are plenty of people who, for very valid reasons, cannot do that. So I definitely don't want to draw a distinction between, like, being arrested is courage, whereas as not being arrested is cowardice, because that's not true. There's a lot of privilege that really has to do with that. So if you are an immigrant, especially an illegal one, or if you already have some kind of a record, or if you don't know, I mean, the arrest process is pretty quick, for at least for something like what I did. But if you've got family, if you've got children, if you've got pets, even if you've got responsibilities that require you to know that you're coming home at night, those are all very valid. So um, as I went through that questionnaire, I honestly felt, um, first of all, I feel okay with civil disobedience, again, with Martin Luther King Jr. as my example. I see that as a good thing. I see it as a valid way to protest injustice and unjust acts. And so I was fine with that. And as far as personally getting arrested, I've never had any kind of a record before. And so but I felt, again, that I have a lot of privilege. I don't have children that need me to take care of them. I'm very lucky with my work, with Mormon stories and with Mormon discussions, that that those who employ me are sympathetic to the cause, and are able and flexible enough to work with me. So my job is not on the line by getting arrested. And so I just felt that, what good is the privilege I have if I'm not willing to use it, to put
For
it on the line, and to use it, yeah, for those who don't have it, and to stand in front of people who don't have that. Um, and so anyway, so I just want to say, these protests are designed so that anyone can participate at any level. And so and that was just something that we all made sure to understand and be very, very clear about. So with these kinds of things, the police give warnings. So it's not just like a quick, like, in an instant, they, unless something bad happens. But again, the point is not for something bad or out of control to happen. It's supposed to be very civil. Um, but even then, just we would have protest buddies. I was buddies with somebody who was a minor, so they definitely did not want to get arrested, because it's a lot more complicated for them if they did. And so anyway, so if that minor was still with me at the point where the arrest was going to happen, I would have made sure, along with others, to get him out of there so that he would not have to face those consequences, if that makes sense. So I hope that answered your question. Did I leave anything out? Or I mean, that's honestly the feeling where I was
You-
at. And I was nervous about things because I was mostly worried about the quote unquote pro life crowd, because they can be very nasty and unpleasant, and there have been times where they've kind of broken into uh
Clash.
protests. Yeah. And so and sometimes in protests, we've seen on the news, it just takes one crazy person, either with a gun or with a vehicle, and decides to drive through and harm people. That's always a possibility. So even though it was a low one, I did feel some apprehension that depending on if there was somebody like that around, that there could be really dire consequences um, for what I was about to do. But again, like I said, the decision had been made, and I knew that was a really low possibility. And so it was far more important for me to show up and be there. So
So you
yeah.
want to talk about the night before? Any other aspects of it?
I didn't sleep, I think, which you know about, but that's not really uh unusual, I think. My brain is just kind of always going. So sometimes on normal days, that's tough for me. So yeah, for something like that, and I was busying myself with really useless projects, it probably would have been good for me to force myself to lay down and try to fall asleep, but I just had to keep my hands and my mind busy. So yeah, I got about an hour before I got up to get on the train to head out. And I sent a few friends. I didn't post this publicly, but I sent a few friends a picture. You were one of the ones that I sent this to, and we'll bring it up later. But it ended up being but used. So yeah. So to start with the protest, we had a location that we met at, where we were told what we were doing, and we got into groups. And so what we did was we were going around to specific locations around the Supreme Court, with our banners, with our cheering, with our shouts to
How early in the morning is that?
oh, very 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 early. So we met at 7 a.m. and then we started mobilizing and heading towards the Supreme Court between 7:30 to 8 a.m. And yeah, so again, we split into different groups, and we had different specific streets or places that we were going to protest at. And the police were there the whole time. There's a specific set of police for the Capitol. It's the Capitol Hill Police. It's not Washington D.C. Metro Police. It's a different group, and that's all they do. Um, and most of them are on bicycles. So we kind of constantly had this following of police officers. And there were times, yeah, where we were marching and walking. There were other times where we sat down and we were either in the road, um, or in the end, when I got arrested, it was a walkway. um, so yeah, so that was towards the end of it. We started on a walkway, heading closer to the building, to the Supreme Court. And I'm not this was the first time I've ever done an action like this, but it did seem like one of the organizers, a veteran of the action, who was there when the police, like, they got in front of us and impeded us on the walkway. She seemed genuinely surprised that they did that. And so I don't know if that was a normal thing, or if there's just something different about that day, or if they've changed rules or something like that. Anyway, she did seem genuinely surprised that we were stopped as we started down this sidewalk. And so anyway, so that's where uh I guess the signal was given of whether to, if you want to back off, and if you did not want to, and you were willing to potentially risk arrest, then to stay. And so I was up front, I was part of this group, and so I decided to stay. We laid our banner on the ground. I sat behind it, and we
And
stayed
your
that way. And
buddy,
So my buddy, luckily, he wasn't part of the original group, so I didn't have to shoo him off. So he already was safe and out of harm's way. There was well over 100 people who were willing to be arrested if it came to that, but the police only got 13 of us, I guess, and I was one of those lucky 13. But I think part of it is because they actually kind of surrounded us pretty quickly. So not only did they initially block us in the front coming forward, and that's where, like, that's when we sat down um to stay there because we weren't going to back off. um it was pretty quickly after that they also had us surrounded behind us as well, so the crowd couldn't get bigger, which was probably very strategic for them. I do know in the past there have been larger amounts of arrestees in situations like this, which is also maybe why what happened after isn't quite what I was told would potentially happen. I was told potentially, like, if it did come to arrest, I would likely be processed either there or just kind of off to the side in the grass, like not far from where it actually happened, that I could be processed pretty quickly, or potentially taken to like a different building or a warehouse down the street that was really unlikely for me to actually be taken in to the jail. And that is what ended up happening. So yeah, so once the police kind of had us surrounded, it lasted several minutes there. They give warnings, again, which I appreciate. So there were specifically 3 warnings to leave or to disperse, and that if people didn't, that it would potentially lead to an arrest. And so we all stayed. We sang and we chanted a bit more. We also shared some stories with each other, and then after that 3rd warning, at some point, that's when the police decided to start arresting, and it was very civil. It was and very polite, I think, both us to them and both to, them to us. And so really just started coming up to us one at a time, right? And tapping us on the shoulder and saying, "You're under arrest, can you please stand up?" And so there were a few people arrested ahead of me. I was kind of like somewhere in the middle.
So you didn't
And
swing at any of the officers?
no, no, no. And I know you're joking asking that, but that's really the point. When you're doing civil disobedience, and these kinds of protests, the last thing you want is for people to feel like that you deserve what you're getting. And
You
I
have to be
don't believe,
civil.
yeah, and I don't believe in assaulting the police, when they're there doing their job, and I know, and I'm disobeying direct orders. um there's no point for an escalation of violence, especially in the situation that I was in. And even if I think there's justified times where police are misbehaving, violence towards officers is always extremely risky thing to do, even if you are in the right. So it's not something that I can ever really recommend. So I know you were joking bringing it up, but I think it's an important point. So yeah, so the point
And
was, never would never want to escalate or increase, something like that.
and how many were like meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning, and about how many were in the total event, would you say?
Um, there was a very large rally afterwards that was scheduled from 10 to 12 that ended up going way past that. And that was in front of the Supreme Court. So the protest part that happened earlier, um, that went until we ended up getting arrested, which was sometime before 10. So participants in that, I don't have the exact numbers, but I believe it was around 200. It was over 200, but I don't know how much over. It could be a lot or it could be a little. I
And
do
then
know,
the
like,
rally was much larger.
the rally was much, much larger. It was jointly done by Planned Parenthood and the ACLU. There
Mhm.
might have been some other charities and organizations involved, and so I have no clue how many were at that. But that was the far, far bigger event, and I'm
And
lucky I
in a
was
way,
actually able to get at the tail end of it.
you have sort of
Yeah.
mentioned that people have told me, what a badass Maven is for doing that. And you think that not only are the other 200 that were marching, but maybe all the women and all the supporters who were at the um, gathering afterwards, the rally, they're all heroes as well, right?
I think anyone willing to talk about this issue is a badass, even if it's a Facebook post. I know a lot of times people we can get made fun of for what's called like armchair activism, but even if you're doing something or posting something online on Facebook to show your support of a just cause, I think that that's brave because there are impacts to that. And
That's my badass sharing finger on the
there
mouse.
you go.
Share,
Yeah.
share,
Yeah.
share.
Because these things bring awareness, and they also help to really bring awareness to other people, but also show, I think it's really important to see the solidarity among others. One of the most defeating or the scariest thing about situations like this, and for me, when Roe versus Wade was overturned initially, was really feeling isolated, really feeling alone, and really feeling like, man, for this to happen, there's a lot of people who just don't care. Um, Sorry, I'm adjusting my chair. That just don't care about us, don't care about women, or I mean, not just okay. I mean, there's people really actively working behind the scenes to do what they did to harm women. But then there's just a lot of apathy, like among my own family members, even ones who, went to the funeral and were directly there for the aftermath of this relative that passed. And so yeah, it just anytime people are sharing and voicing support, it adds to, I think, the overall feeling of hope, and just knowing that there's solidarity, and really there's more of us than there are of them. So anyway, so that's what I would say. I don't feel any more of a badass for being arrested than I feel when I just post about this issue, um, because it's important to me. So
That's right.
anyone who supports it, you guys are all badasses. And in-person support is important if you can do it, if there's anything you can do that way, but um don't feel bad if you can't do that. I didn't think I would be able to do that initially, so yeah,
Well,
so that
you have a cute story as well about after you got arrested. Tell us about what happened after you were
uh
led away. Where
um
about handcuffs.
oh, so this was that, yeah. So for the arrest, I guess maybe this is where like maybe funny stuff comes in. Like I had a bottle of water, and I actually had a Cliff Bar with me as a snack, and I did know that potentially, um, that it could be several hours. So I had maybe a snack sometime in the morning before, um, before going there. But yeah, once they started to like tap people on the shoulder, someone had mentioned like now might be the time to pull out your snack. So I was like, oh yeah. So I pull out the Cliff Bar, and I only got like 3 bites in before I got the tap on my shoulder, that I was being arrested. Um and so yeah, so my mouth's kind of full in it. And then I asked if I could drink water, but at that point they said no. Which makes sense, I guess. Maybe in an extreme circumstance someone could like pre-poison their water. So like at arrest they could be like, let me just drink, and then now something
Or
happens, blame it on the
you
cops
could
or something.
spit it
So
at
I
the
get
officers.
which is also assault if you spit on officers.
There you
Yeah,
go.
so I get it. I just wanted to put that out there. There are good reasons why officers would do that. I do think some people hearing that might think that that sounds um,
Cruel.
unfair or deliberately punitive. Yeah, when it's not. It's understandable. It's completely understandable. But yeah, so so I was really thirsty. They instead of using regular handcuffs, they had the plastic cuffs, which are basically like really large, really thick kind of zip ties.
Mhm.
But I'm a
They
small
don't have like a they don't have like pink boa feathers attached to them.
no, yeah, definitely not those kind of handcuffs either. But my wrists are kind of small, so the officer was struggling to get them on tight enough. So there was a point where I asked, like, do you have it? Are you good? And I wasn't making fun of them. I was just checking in with them, like, I don't know. I guess for some reason I felt bad that I was causing them issues because my wrists are too small. I
That's
guess
right.
that's kind of where the check-in was. So I find that kind of funny. But anyway, yeah, they had someone take my picture, and at first I thought it was like media, but then when I realized that the police were specifically stopping me for this person to take a picture, I asked, I was like, is that like my mugshot? Is that what this is a version of? And they just chuckled. They didn't ever answer. So I think it's for record keeping. I don't know if it's really like an official mugshot. But anyway, so they actually put me in the back of the police van, which again was not really what I was expecting to happen at that point. So yeah, so my hands were behind my back. I'm in this police van. I'm the first. There's kind of two sides, and it was separated, so there's a barrier in the middle. So they had filled up the one side. I was first in for the second, and so I couldn't see or even barely hear who was on the other side, who had also been arrested. And once someone else came in and they were sat next to me, because I knew I could get out of the cuffs. So I did. I tried it, and I was able to pull my hands out of the cuffs and I scratch my nose a little bit. And then I was able to just get him back in once we got to the police station. So then it was just a lot of sitting. Oh, they took everything off of me, of course. They I mean, not everything, obviously I kept my clothes. I even had a pin. So this one says resist. I wasn't wearing this one. I don't think I was wearing 4 other ones. I know I actually have some of them here. So one of them is this sunflower. This is this is a flower. This is a representation of the family member that passed, and these were actually given out um at her funeral. So this was kind of my solidarity or a representation of her. um and then I also have this one. This is a well-known quote. This is from a actually from a Mormon feminist: well-behaved women rarely make history. Her name is Laurel Thatcher Ulrich. And I can't remember which other ones I had on, but some of them have like a safety clasp that's really difficult to take off. So they took off 2, they left the other 2 on. They did take off the headband I was wearing. I was wearing glasses. They left those on. And but yeah, everything else, like I had a little waist, like
Fanny pack.
uh, fanny pack or bum bag for those in the UK, that my water had been attached to the Cliff Bar, like all of that stuff. Yeah, so all of that was taken. So yeah, so I had a good chat with the other women, and there was one of the 13 was a man, who, and he's part of the organization. His name is Akib, so I thought that was really cool that he was there and willing to represent with us. So anyway, yeah, we all just had a good chat, getting to know each other. What's your name? Where are you from? As we were waiting for the van to fill up, and then we were taken to the police station. Um, and yeah, so that's where I put my hands back in the cuffs to walk in. But yeah, it's really uncomfortable to have your hands behind your back for a long time. I know for some people, if it's just like mobility or just depending on their weight and how large they are, it can be difficult. So even though I didn't have initial difficulty, that was interesting to me, I guess, to see that even someone who can put their arms behind their back without difficulty, it still hurts for them to be there a long time. It's just not a natural position to be in. So while I was sitting and waiting, I did actually pull my hand out. I still kept my hands like behind me, but not exactly in the cuffs, just to give me a little bit more room. I didn't want to make it obvious or say anything that I pulled, because I didn't want to get into more trouble. But once they called me into the back, uh, I just pulled my hands out and I just gave it to him, and I apologized. I was like, I was able to pull myself out. Sorry. And I don't know why I think that's funny to me that I
Yes.
did
Sorry, I
that, or
have
that I
small
that,
wrists.
yeah, I was like, sorry, it was uncomfortable. Here's your handcuffs back.
And
I'm
they
not
probably
trying to,
thought
yeah, as
you
I'm
were
there
like
like getting arrested. Yeah.
they probably
Anyway,
thought you were like Houdini's great granddaughter or something like
no,
that.
no, I think they've seen that before, probably.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's they asked me, a lot of questions, just, like if there were medications I needed while I was in there, no, stuff like that. Um,
And so is
and
it
then
like a 15-minute ride to wherever you went by the
I
time you
think,
got in the van?
yeah.
And then how long were
Well,
you at the
on for
processing?
quite a while. The processing, because the initial processing, and they put all of our stuff in clear plastic bags with like our initial, and they asked for ID. I had that readily accessible because I knew they were going to ask for that. Um, so yeah, so the extras, the things that they did take off, they, put in those plastic bags. So that took a little bit of time on the lawn. So it took a bit of time to fill up the vans because they were doing that for everybody. And I think because most of us were women who were arrested, they had plenty of female officers, but most of them, a lot of them were male. And so for the frisking, especially because there were, the touching, even with my headband, they kind of like touched my hair. Um, and then, yeah, just over the clothing, everywhere else and so they make sure that female officers are available for women to do that. So I think that's also why it maybe took a little bit longer, and they only did a few of us at a time instead of just like having all 13 of us getting arrested by an officer at the same time. I don't know, this is my first time, but that's how they did, and I think that's why. So I don't know, it took a good I'm not sure time wise. I just know that it we were sat in the walkway for a while before they even started to arrest us. That process took another good while before they took us to the station. We sat for, and again, when you're not doing much, time can really drag by slow. So I think what seems like an hour in my mind may have been half an hour, may have been 15 minutes, may have been 40. I'm not really sure, but it did seem like a long time for us to get processed one by one. And then they kind of put us into another uh, cell, um, with the, with the little silver toilet and with the silver bench, really just like for one person, but they had 8 of us in there.
So you got the full
uh,
experience.
yeah, well, I don't think I had the full experience, no, but close enough, I guess. So luckily, no one needed to use the restroom. I mean, obviously, all of us would have done our best to give that person privacy, but the first one in did. And so she was lucky because she was the first one in, and by herself, she was able to use it. I was getting close. I was wondering if I was going to be the one to have to do that. And I'm really glad that we, we started to be released shortly after. But I was read my rights. I was read them on a card. Um, and then there were actually places to kind of initial the bottom to say that I understood them, and to answer whether or not I wanted to, talk with police without a lawyer, which of course I said no. And, that was it. And then we talked some more. And then once everybody's cards had been signed, they basically released all of us in, in small-ish groups. They gave us our stuff, gave me my piece of paper. I paid a $50 fine. It's called a post and forfeit, which is, I think, a little bit different on the Capitol than it happens
I
elsewhere.
think for Joseph Smith, that was called leg bail.
I don't know. I don't know the
The historians
similarities.
can look that up.
I do want to say that there are legitimate reasons to be arrested. So I don't particularly like being compared to Joseph Smith, because I don't think he was standing for the right anytime that he was arrested. Um, but yeah, maybe leg bail is something similar. I don't know, but
That's
they
when
don't have
he
bail.
was a glass liquor trial, during the glass liquor
Oh,
trial.
yeah.
So
Um,
anyways,
yeah. Anyway, so it's just, and I brought cash because I don't
okay.
think they accept card payments. Um,
And then
and
you went
so
back
yeah,
to the rally.
yeah. I went
How
to
do you
the
get back to the
rally.
rally?
So the police station was actually really close. I could hear it up the street. It was literally just down the
A few
street. So
blocks.
yeah, yeah. And I actually ended up. So I get the rally was. I think I ended up getting there around 11:30. So it was technically ending at noon. I did leave early, and I ended up kind of sort of coming back to the area a little bit. I left early to go back to our meeting point to gather up my things and, the other stuff I had brought with me but not brought for the protest part. I just wanted to make sure that they didn't end up getting locked up in this place. Um, and so, yeah, but back at the rally though, it was really great to hear some of the speeches just from the very end. And one of them actually was the Attorney General for Oregon, who I didn't know was out there, and I didn't know anyone else from Oregon out there at the protest. I'm sure maybe there were some at the rally, but it's definitely a long distance. But yeah, Oregon's Attorney General is a woman, um, and her name is Ellen. I'm looking it up right now because I want to make sure. Okay, Rosenblum is her last name. So yeah, so funnily enough, like what she started talking and saying that she was from Oregon, and she talking about this issue. when she was done and she came down from the stand, I just went up to her and I was just like, "Hey, I flew here from Oregon. I just got arrested." And she's like, "Wow!" And she actually asked to take a picture. So I didn't get a picture of the two of us, but she did, I guess, with her assistant. Anyway, that was just kind of a cool chance meeting. I thought of
Yeah.
someone else from Oregon, and just again seeing a politician that really cares. And I really get that kind of about politicians, and a lot of decisions made in Oregon anyway tend to be a bit more equitable. And like they just passed something, or a resolution, like to not ban books. And I just thought, yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad that you have to kind of say that out loud, but we're seeing that also happening, across the country, where yeah,
It's
books are
like
being
almost
banned.
like we're not going to let slave traders into our state anymore.
Yeah, just
It's like, why would anybody even say that?
but I'm glad that we are. So anyway, so that's the main, I guess, aftermath of it. And then
And how did
oh,
you
go ahead.
feel as the day was winding down? Like the rally's
Exhausted.
over? Yeah. Yeah.
It was hitting me in the police station, actually, after I'd been processed. Just the lack of sleep, uh, my medication for ADHD, I didn't bring any with me. For the second half of the day, I had taken it myself that morning, so that was winding down. Plus the adrenaline and everything, just all of it. I was definitely ready for a crash. Long before I ended up, making it back to the home that I was staying at. But um, yeah, I was
So it's
quite exhausted.
like a 45-minute train ride back to Lee's
Yeah,
house.
um, I don't recall
Did you
about,
did
and they
you
actually met me at a station too. They're about 20 minutes away, from the station they picked me up at. So it was definitely about an hour, I think, to get back. And
did you
then,
feel glad that you weren't in jail still?
oh, for sure, I was glad that like it was a mercifully short thing. And so and some people have wondered, like, okay, were you really arrested though, or are you just detained, like, do you have a record now? And yes, I do. I was really arrested. I have an arrest on my record now. If someone were to do like a federal background check, that will come up. That's my understanding. So yeah, it's in the records. I'm on the books.
There you go.
So yeah, and I mean, I'm not too worried about it. Again, my job is not one where, something like that can mess it up, although it's possible that future opportunities may be close to me. But um again, I don't feel like I was doing anything really criminal. I was I think I was standing up for civil liberties and civil rights, and so I'm not ashamed of that, and I'm not ashamed to talk about it if I were to ever be applying
Guess we
somewhere
can
in the
show
future.
your Maven arrested picture now.
Oh yeah. So the picture that I had sent out to a few people, one of them is Rebecca Biblioteca with Mormonish. She created this and posted it. So that's a picture of me on the train. Um, and then she also kind of clipped, if you can see that there, or
Can you
at
make
least
that
one.
bigger?
Um, maybe. Let's see.
Oh, look at that.
Is that better?
Yeah,
Okay.
bigger.
Um, I think maybe I can.
Yeah, that's where I
It's not.
saw the plastic cuffs story. You had told it to
Yeah.
Rebecca, and
Yeah,
she
if you see
posted
at
it.
the side there, she asked for a statement, so I talked about it a little bit, so you can see that there. Um, let me I guess I can try to make this, like, full size. Um, is that better maybe? Try to
Yeah.
make it a little bit bigger, but
And
yeah.
also, when I announced that you had been arrested, I was able to
Yeah,
get
you made
a
an
clip
announcement.
of you sitting down at your protest.
Yeah, I did not make it into very many pictures of the arrest, which I'm kind of glad for, but I did find it funny that out of it, yeah, an Instagram clip, you were able to find where I was at and
And
and grab a screenshot of it.
and I was so proud of you, and I'm sure lots of people listening, some maybe not so, but most people listening now, or are probably proud. They would express it. They could leave a note
Yeah.
in the comments, and we want to show support for Maven, and
And
Maven is
I
not
appreciate
over. She's not
no.
done.
I wanna explain something actually real quick. I meant to do this at the very beginning, but, we have a purple background now instead of our usual one, and I'm wearing a lot of green, and that I was wearing green at the protest. I was wearing this shirt, but I was wearing a different one on top of it. I did just wanna show this to so purple has been, a color for feminism and equality for a long time, but green is also, becoming, um the color, I think, for especially reproductive rights. And so this is a Facebook post that I made, that I had found just before. So this looks like March 24th, and the protest was March 27th. Um, and I explained what it is. This is from the Washington Post. It says this is a picture of women in Argentina protesting at the U.S. Embassy when Roe versus Wade was overturned. I didn't know this happened back at that time, but I've been deeply touched by this show of support. We are worldwide sisters in it together. I got goosebumps seeing it for the first time. Um, and so yeah, and this is where the green really originated from, was from these women in South America fighting for their reproductive rights. And so yeah, so when we lost ours, they came out in force with the green to show that. And so we've also started to use green and use their that you can see like the handkerchiefs there that they
And
have.
then in
Yeah.
the show that I did, the short one about you being arrested, I included a link to that article so we could do it again
Okay. Yeah.
to our show here. And yeah,
Yeah.
so that's the green. I wore green to support you on that day
Yeah.
for
And
that.
I have to say, like, I know I told like people close to me about it, and I was posting publicly, but I really do appreciate the comments and the people who've been really supportive of me, especially I think just coming from, I mean, we're my own family. Sadly, ironically, devastatingly, doesn't understand the importance or the impact of this. Uh, I don't. Sometimes I have felt kind of alone myself in it, or just like the people that I connect with, or the people who understand this with me are in the emails, they're in the other forums I'm in, kind of outside of the ex-Mormon space where I'm at most publicly. Um, and so yeah, just to see the support has been really heartening. And it was kind of funny to me when with your announcement, like Maven's getting arrested. And again, I'm not ashamed of it, but I just didn't really think very many people would care. And it's still kind of a small thing. It's not like I'm blowing up ex-Mormon spaces with it at all, which is fine. But I do really very much appreciate those um who are with me, I guess, in solidarity and encouraging me that way. So yeah, thank you. And my favorite thing about if people haven't seen, it was a really short one, the video that Jean did. Um, my favorite thing about it was at the end, you said like things are going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And that just really touched me. And I really want to think that. And that's why I'm going to keep doing this. Um, I do have times where I feel really frustrated and upset, and I feel hopeless, especially, when reports come out like Kate Cox, who is denied a necessary abortion, or when I hear of other women who quite literally die because of this in some of these really terrible states. Um, of a woman who was jailed under suspicion of trying to have an abortion when she wasn't even pregnant, or there's a story of a woman who did try to have an abortion, was put in jail, and yet was given no help, no prenatal care, no labor care when she went into labor, so she had her baby in the showers at the jail. It's just stuff like this. It really shows, like, it's about the suffering of women. It's not about babies. It's not about any kind of concern or love or care for them. Otherwise, that for sure wouldn't have happened. Or even, when minors are raped and end up having to go through an entire pregnancy, and also the additional trauma of giving birth in a young body and with a young mind that's just really not ready for that, when the event, the rape that caused it is it obviously was not consensual. So when which is another thing, like the people who call themselves pro-life say they care about, and that if an encounter is not consensual, or if it's a minor, which obviously it's not going to be consensual, and a minor for sure is somebody that needs an abortion. It's just the amount that are still not being able to get it and are still having to go through the additional trauma and pain and suffering of a birth, to give birth to a rapist's baby, especially if that rapist is able to like try to fight for parental rights. It's really sad, it's really frustrating, it's really disheartening. And sometimes it seems, I don't know, I think the most frustrating or disheartening thing is to know that even though the majority of Americans understand abortion is healthcare and support that, whenever it's put to a vote, abortion rights end up being protected and voted for. Even in these really red states, these really anti-abortion states, these anti-choice states, they even there they're still making headway. But it does feel hard to know when you have like the Supreme Court of the United States. They're the ones that did this in the first place. When the extremists are the ones that seem to have the political power and the wealth to be able to do this to us, to do this to so many of us women, just the fact that they have the audacity, the encouragement to have tried what they did, and then to have been able to succeed on top of it. This is going to be a really long fight to get our rights back. It's going to take years, I hope not decades, but this is something I'm just going to keep fighting for it. There's been times where I and other women have felt like we just want to be done with the United States and just, bag it, call it good, and immigrate somewhere else. Um, like I said, I could do that because I can work from anywhere in the world, and I don't have children or a spouse or a partner that would kind of keep me locked here. But I have nieces that I care very much about, and I'm not leaving until they get their rights back, at least, because they're the ones that are in far more danger than I am myself. And one of my nieces, especially, she's 13. She's starting to go through puberty, but she's uh she's severely mentally disabled, so she's basically a toddler in a 13-year-old's body, and she's not verbal. So it just kills me that first of all, that anybody could do something to her and she wouldn't be able to talk about it. And especially if she's starting to menstruate, it's something like, blood in her underwear wouldn't necessarily be an indication that some trauma has happened. And so yeah, just the fact that like she could get pregnant and not be able to, first of all, talk about what happened to her to get her that way, or even after it's discovered. Like I would never want her to continue with a pregnancy, first of all, again, because she's a toddler. Really, she has no idea what's happening to her, and because she's not verbal, she couldn't advocate for herself in any way at all. Not even to tell how she's feeling, if something's wrong, if she's feeling pain, if she were to start to have a miscarriage, or you know she just doesn't, she wouldn't be able to talk about it. And it's just really frightening to me to think that, and Utah is one of the states that's trying really hard. They've been delayed in enforcing and enacting some of the more extreme abortion bans that they want to, ironically, due to some of their own laws. So the pro-lifers here have kind of been hoisted by their own petard, but still Utah is trying to be a
Right.
state as bad as Idaho or Texas. And so I just really hate to think of the danger that she's in, because as much as my family members like to just say that an abortion would be okay for her because of her developmental understanding and disability, and also because of her age, and also because there's no way that the sex that caused it would be consensual, just that belief is not enough to actually change reality. And that's what women and girls are facing everywhere else. That like you can say that you think that, but that does not actually make a difference for the reality for women and girls, children that are facing it. So anyway, that's why I am doing what I'm doing. That's why I'm not leaving. And if this is a long fight, I'm in it for the long run. There are times where I need to take breaks. There are times where it gets really heavy for me. And for you, for other people, and that's fine. If you need to take a break because we're gonna need long term. So if you need to take a break now so that you've got the energy to come back to this later, do it. That's what I do when I go through these cycles of feeling like it seems hopeless. Versus like, no, I feel ready. Like I'm gonna fight for this. I've got the energy. I'm galvanized. Um, I just I'm just gonna keep fighting. I'm here for the long term, and if anything, even if this doesn't get fixed in my lifetime, which I really hope that that's not the case. I hope we can turn it around. Like I said, in years, certainly, hopefully not decades, etc. But even if it was something that if I fought the rest of my life for, that I would not see it, I would still do it and keep doing it because uh, I don't know.
Cause
I'll
is
be
just.
I let the fascists rest on their laurels and have an easy life and an easy time, ignoring what they have done and are doing to women and girls in this country. So if all I can do is just poke the bear, that's what I'm gonna do. If that's all the power that I have, that's what I'm gonna do. I am going to absolutely be a thorn in the side of the people who do this and who support this. So, and I hope others will join me, at least in talking about it, at least in trying to help other people understand what's really at
And
risk here.
I think I'd like to point out that the militant right religious people that are doing these things, it's basically, shadow misogyny hiding behind pro-life.
Yeah, yeah, it's misogyny that they're trying to make sound noble by hiding behind babies and pretending to care about them when they really don't. And their voting shows that. It's typically the fundamentalist religions, because there are many who are religiously pro-choice as a matter of faith. So I don't want to lump them in with the religious who are misogynists and pro-life. So I just want to give a shout out to them in solidarity. But yeah, the ones who are religiously pro-life, it is about seeing women as objects and children, the babies themselves, as objects. They are typically the ones to vote against or to restrict any resources for women, for mothers, for families, for children, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to food, when it comes to shelter, when it comes to education. They consistently vote in ways that harm the people that they're pretending that they care about. And they pretend to care about women as well, but these women, and the pro-lifers at the Supreme Court this last week, who are trying to, take down this medication, their concerns were all hypothetical, and that was really obvious, despite the known catastrophic results of not having this available. Somehow, again, it's just through illegitimate means and corrupt politicians and funding with dark, shadow organizations, again hiding behind the ideals that they really do not fit them, which again would be pro-life or pro-family, pro-motherhood, pro-women. None of these things, but they all try to hide behind it. Where they're, saying the FDA is going to have to be responsible for the hypothetical harm that might hypothetically come to women, that is not happening now, but could someday. And the fact that they were trying to restrict this very important, very needed medication countrywide for that, it just shows, I think, how really corrupt and evil they are. And again, they were doing it under the guise of caring about women's health. And it
So,
just,
Maven,
the statistics do not back that up.
would this be a good time to say that our listeners would like to know what they can do? Would that be okay to go right to there?
Yeah, I guess this is just a small ask. There's Boy, I wish I had more like broader things to go to if you're interested in the movement as a whole. But I do have a um excuse me. I do have a business that I've started. I'm not really doing much with it. I just basically have the handle. I want to make it a nonprofit. And I just need help because I just really don't know what I'm doing. So if there is anyone out there who has experience starting a nonprofit, especially with accounting and money type things, I'm just really out of my depth there. I am asking for help for anyone that has anything to offer to at least even get it off the ground. I do have a different email address than what I usually give out. So this is the one that goes to that again, that business that I want to make into a nonprofit. And the point of it is to be a platform for these kinds of issues. I actually, and we've talked to Jean about pulling Latter Daily Digest underneath this umbrella. The company is called Misbehaving Media. So you see that there in the email line. So it's Maven at misbehavingmedia.com, and misbehaving is spelled MS, like Ms, what is it, the prefix, and then behavin, BEHAVIN, media.com. So Maven at misbehavingmedia.com. It is on the screen. If you're listening, you can check there, and we'll also have it in the show notes. If you want to participate, if you have any help or advice to help me get this off the ground, please contact me there. I also want to platform other voices as well through media like podcasting, or blogs or whatever other people are interested in. And so if that's something, if you have a message, if you want to get your voice out there, either about, it doesn't have to be about abortion necessarily, but these kinds of issues that are really important. Once I get off the ground, that might be something you can contact me about potentially platforming that. And again, it's not just women's voices, but that is kind of the idea. The misbehaving woman is where the name comes from, and that's the media I would want to be able to support women. So yeah, that's the ask there. And yeah, I'm sorry this went so long. There was
Oh
more we
no,
were
it's
going to talk
perfect.
about, but I guess
We
maybe
can
for
we
another.
can we can revisit that at another podcast. Everyone, Maven is asking for more than just a finger that shares or likes a page. She's asking for people that can contribute some experience and time and effort in making her
If you have,
vision a reality.
yeah, I'm just really out of my depth, and I have my hands, my fingers going in a lot of projects, and so it's just a bit overwhelming for me. So so I appreciate anyone who's able to offer that, and Eugene for platforming me and letting me talk about this.
Well,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Maven, so much. It's been great having you here. I've thoroughly enjoyed every time we get a chance to talk, during the podcast, before the podcast, after the podcast. There's I I I can live a better life through you.
Thanks. I didn't know if you were finishing, if that was the
And
more
I
to that
appreciate
sentence.
it. My throat's getting a little sore, but anyhow, I just think the world of you, and thank everybody for watching, and like and subscribe and share, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Jean. Thanks, everybody.